Hello, everyone. I'm Dorothy Skye. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin, I welcome you to the second in our series of webinars on the subject of PFAS, per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. It is particularly appropriate to begin tonight's discussion with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are standing on the ancestral lands of Native Americans, who for many centuries have been its stewards and who respond and respect to the interconnected relationships among everything on this land. That stewardship has been jeopardized by more recent inhabitants whose conduct and management practices have fallen short. Here, for instance, is a photo of PFAS foam floating on the Peshtigo River in northeast Wisconsin. The next slide gives an indication of the extent of PFAS contamination throughout the country. Focus on the light blue dots that represent locations where PFAS levels in drinking water exceed proposed limits. Wisconsin has its share, though other parts of the country are in a worse fix. PFAS are a huge family of man-made chemicals extensively developed since the 1930s. Their unique properties led to their successful marketing for many commercial, industrial, and military purposes. They are ubiquitous to the point that almost all Americans now have measurable amounts of PFAS in their blood. Unfortunately, evidence of adverse health effects have emerged. Concern about these chemicals have been welling up in our news feeds recently. But for years, PFAS have been seeping into the private and commercial wells from which we draw our drinking water. Concerns are heightened by the fact that PFAS compounds are nearly indestructible. This is because of the very stable carbon-fluorine chemical bonds depicted in this ball and stick graphic of the two oldest PFAS substances. Fluorine atoms are in green, carbon atoms are chaining up in the gray. PFAS chemicals are absorbed into our bodies mostly by ingestion, but also from inhalation and to a lesser degree from skin contact. They come from many sources, including coated food wrappers, nonstick pans, water-shedding outdoor gear, upholstery and carpet repellents, cosmetics, and even Band-Aids and disposable plastic containers. PFAS are in the manure that fertilizes our farm fields and in the foam sprayed to extinguish water-resistant fires. Unfortunately, PFAS from all of these sources have accumulated in our groundwater and in our bodies. In the first webinar on PFAS on March 12, 2024, the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin engaged speakers to explain how PFAS became so pervasive and why they are harmful. We learned that PFAS are associated with health risks, including kidney and testicular cancer, thyroid disease, changes in liver enzymes, increases in cholesterol, decreased antibody response to some vaccines, increase in high blood pressure complications in pregnancy, and small decreases in babies' birth weights. Tonight, the second webinar will focus on what to do about PFAS. Our four speakers each have a unique perspective. Key considerations they will call to our attention are lived experience with PFAS contamination in soil and water, limitations and costs of current remediation options, innovative remediation options and methods, and political controversies and the status of legislative proposals. To start us off, I'll ask Susan Johnson to please introduce our first speaker. Susan.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. It is my distinct pleasure and honor to introduce our first speaker this evening. Her name is Cindy Boyle, and she is a charter member of SOH2O, Save Our Water. Cindy and her family have lived in the town of Peshtigo for almost 30 years. In the neighboring city of Marinette, she owns and operates Boyle Design Group, a marketing and communications company, and never anticipated that her communication expertise would someday be applied toward environmental advocacy. That was until she learned that her family and community had unknowingly been drinking PFAS for decades through their private drinking wells. Alarmed into action, Cindy and a group of local concerned citizens organized and created SOH2O Save Our Water and initiated aggressive efforts to educate their community about the risk of PFAS and advocate for accountability. Grassroots advocacy, initiated in 2017, has included testimony at State Senate Committee, the Natural Resources Board, and advising on existing PFAS legislation, along with the original CLEAR Act draft legislation. While participating in state and regional PFAS initiatives, Cindy worked most tirelessly during her recent term as Town of Peshtigo chairwoman toward engaging her community and working toward a permanent safe water solution. Although the Town of Peshtigo residents remain at risk, Cindy continues to advocate for state groundwater standards and enthusiastically welcomes collaboration with states and federal agencies and elected officials from both sides of the aisle to tackle this looming challenge facing all of Wisconsin. Cindy, thank you. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Susan. I guess that summary, maybe that was my 5 minutes. Definitely covered it. I'm more accustomed to having a back and forth exchange, questions and answers sort of platform. So this is going to be off the cuff. I don't have any slides to share. I just have a story to tell. And my story, unfortunately, is not unique to Wisconsin. It's certainly not unique to the United States. The only remaining unique variable to our PFAS story is maybe the length of time that we've been facing it. So we are at about the 7.5-year mark. And I can share with you a little bit about our experience, just so that if, God forbid, you or your community members find yourselves faced with the reality of being exposed to PFAS, it won't feel maybe altogether as awful as it felt for myself, my family, and our community. So when we were first reached out to, and I'll really summarize because 7.5 years is a long time, but when we were first reached out to, I'll tell you that I honestly, I'm embarrassed to admit, I spent a year in denial. My husband did not. He was very tenacious and very much on top of it, but I really wanted to not think about it for a year. So I liken this very much to, you know, when you're going through the grieving process, some of the stages that you face. When I snapped out of my denial phase, I quickly entered anger. And then, of course, was prompted into immediate action. And we have a very engaged, very informed, intelligent group of community advocates. And we did, you're right, we organized a group called SOH2O, Save Our Water. It started out as a concerned friends and neighbors group. And I'll tell you, you know, in the last 7.5 years, I've listened to stories from around the state, and then I've gone to the National PFAS Conference, and I've gone out to Washington, D.C. a couple times and listened to other impacted innocent landowners and impacted residents. And it is heartbreaking and nauseating how similar the stories are. It's just the same exact playbook. You know, we were talking a little bit earlier that industry definitely has a playbook for the approaches that they follow when the public finds out about these sort of contamination issues. And I think that those of us impacted, we have an unwritten playbook, clearly, because it's similar. You hear the same heartbreak, you see the same reactions, the same steps seem to fall into place. It's just not written. And maybe that's the thing. Maybe it should be. It should be a resource handbook for those people who are impacted. So once I was jolted into anger, of course, like I said, that turned into action, and we formed SOH2O. We created a Facebook page, a small group of members in our community started going door to door, and we were literally, I mean, it helps that I have a marketing business. So we created some marketing material that we could leave with, and we went door to door and knocked on hundreds and hundreds of doors and spent quite literally years educating the public about PFAS. That eventually led to, after several years, you get to a point where you either have to put up or shut up. And quite literally, that's where I found myself. So I decided, okay, I will run for town chair in hopes of providing a permanent safe water solution to all of the impacted residents. So I did, you're right, I did serve 2 years as town chair. And I'm very sad to say that we still don't have a permanent safe water solution. I did run for re-election and I was defeated. On the one hand, that was heartbreaking. And then on the other hand, it was immensely liberating, and it lifted a yoke from my shoulders and allowed me to redirect my energy and attention to where I and others could be impactful. And what I mean by that is the state level and then the federal level. So if you want to talk about PFAS, I liken it very much to asbestos, like how asbestos played out, or even cigarette smoke. I think, our children, their children will look back at this and be horrified that anybody ever ate off of a Teflon pan, or that people actually had exposures to this. It's proving to be a very deadly and very dangerous compounds. The progress that we've seen in that 7.5 years, while often feeling painfully slow, when I actually reflect and start checking the boxes and looking at the progress that's been made, significant strides have been made. Number one, we're having this conversation, and it's not just a one and done, but thank you for running a series on this very important topic. The media has been doing a really good job of educating the public, and we're always grateful for that. A couple of key things. So recently, quite literally within the last month, actually, we finally have a federal drinking water standard for PFAS, for PFOA, PFOS, and then a handful of other compounds. So there are about 14,000 PFAS compounds, so we're only scratching the surface. But the significance of that is that individual states have been piecemealing their answers and their solutions, and it's very difficult to get cohesion around that. So now that the EPA has finally established a rule for drinking water, that will be required by all states to adopt. There's a period of time that'll occur over, but that's a good thing. Drinking water, however, does not mean drinking water for everyone. Drinking water is for those people who are on public utilities, so regulated water systems. My family, our community, we're all on private drinking wells, which of course we get from groundwater. And so it was mentioned earlier, Wisconsin has no groundwater standard around PFAS. So what that means is those people who literally are next door to me, they have public drinking water, and they have a standard that they can feel safe in knowing is enforced. My family, we do not have that same luxury because there's no groundwater standard. And the EPA, the federal government, does not have jurisdiction over groundwater. So that has to be a state rule. So that's going to be our big to-do list task, is continue to work toward groundwater standards so that a third of Wisconsinites can have the same basic standard safety standards that drinking water provides. Another significant component that happened recently, let me clarify. The drinking water standard, I think it's really important to mention that has not been established. One like that has not been established in 30 years. Equally significant is PFOA and PFOS recently being identified as hazardous substances, That has not happened in 40 years. And what I like to tell people is, unfortunately, it means two things in my mind. It means that industry is very, very good at protecting their interests. They've been successful at preventing things, drinking water standards being put in place, things being designated as hazardous substances for decades. But the fact that those two things have occurred should tell all of us just how dangerous PFAS are, and the amount of science that there is behind it in order to verify, prove, and validate these new rules. So I'm encouraged by these federal actions. I think that I always say the horse has left the barn as far as PFAS is concerned, because it seems to me, it's been my experience that once you go looking for PFAS, typically you find it. When you find it, you must now report it. When you report it, people get really angry, like I did. And when they get angry, they tend to reach out to their elected officials, which I know is on this agenda and will be talked about. And when the elected officials have enough people knocking on their door, sending them letters, calling them, telling them that they're just not going to take it anymore, then they're prompted to action. They won't do it, folks, until they're prompted to action. So it's everybody on this call that really needs to take that action and take that initiative and educate themselves. You can always go to SOH2O on Facebook. It's a great resource. Environmental Working Group is another great resource. The Wisconsin DNR's website has some really good information. But that's my general story. I definitely, I've had my blood tested. It is exceedingly high compared to the national average. I had a full thyroidectomy in my 30s. My husband has Parkinson's disease. It's a long story, but I mean, I think that I have a link to even biosludge land spreading from my childhood, where I know that it was spread just a quarter mile from my home. And I had a family of 4, and my mother had kidney cancer. She's no longer living. My dad had a brain tumor. My sister has thyroid disease. So this looks like it's going to be my life's work. Not what I ever thought. I never was an environmentalist. I was never an advocate. I was just a self-employed, wife and mother of 3. And then I found out that I'd been feeding my children poison. And so that's my story. Thank you, everybody, for joining us, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end of the session.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Personal stories are just so important. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Cindy, very much. I'm sorry that you and your neighbors have had to go through this experience, but I'm really grateful to you for having at least shared it with us so that we have a better idea of what you've been through and what other people are going through. Our next speaker is Michael Mucha. He's the Chief Engineer and Director for the Madison Metro Sewerage District. He has a BS in Civil Engineering from UW-Milwaukee, a Master's in Public Administration from the University of Wisconsin, Seattle. He's a registered professional engineer and envisioned sustainability professional, which I'd like to know what that is at some point. But also, he has dedicated his career in local government to building public trust through sustainability. So thank you, Michael, and we're looking forward to hearing what you can share with us.
Thank you, Joy. And Cindy, that was a wonderful story in so many ways, just your experience, but also taking action. And part of the themes that I'll be talking about are our ability and willingness to take action when it comes to PFAS. Okay. Here we go, folks. So I titled this after talking to Joy about how do we intervene skillfully with PFAS. In 2018, when at the district, we started hearing from our colleagues around the country and some folks right here in Madison around the issue of PFAS. And I will tell you, in my 38-year career in public service, I have never heard or experienced so much fear around an issue, and from my own self, had so little knowledge about it. So I had my own fear about it as we're running a regional wastewater treatment plant. So what I thought I would spend my 15 minutes doing is really focusing on how do we approach dealing with PFAS, which is such an overwhelming issue. How do we break it down? And how do we have some optimism that we can actually do something about this? And I'm hoping that some of these ideas work if you're a NGO, if you're a utility, if you're a municipality, if you're a business owner, or a concerned citizen. That's some of these principles, because we have to work together. The district is an anchor institution in the Dane County area because we are tied to the region. We can't pick up our marbles and go home if we don't like what's happening. So we're here, we're invested in the community, and we're here for the long term. We've been here for almost 100 years. We're focused on protecting public health and the environment, and we serve close to 500,000 people and treat 37 million gallons of wastewater a day, which is the equivalent of filling up Camp Randall Stadium halfway every year, or I'm sorry, every day. The problem with PFAS is multifaceted. There's two types of problems in the world that we deal with. One are technical problems, and the other are adaptive challenges. And technical problems are those that we can solve. They might be really difficult, but we know how to do it. The Francis Scott Key Bridge, for example, that collapsed. It is a massive undertaking to remove that bridge, but we have the technology to do it. It's just going to take time and money. Adaptive challenges, on the other hand, are around our values and around our beliefs. And there's sometimes disagreements on what needs to be done or should be done. An example is climate change. The technical solutions are there, but there are so many different beliefs about, is climate change real or not, that we sometimes have a difficulty making progress. And this problem of PFAS lands in both of these areas, and Dr. Yang is going to be hitting on the technical aspects of this, and Paul Heinen is going to be dealing with the political, which I call more the adaptive pieces. And so this is really why this is such a difficult issue for us, because there are really no real solutions out there. They're emerging, and there are a lot of emotions. And so when we were dealing with this at the sewage district, we had to find a way to realize we were dealing with both the adaptive and technical aspects of this project. And so the success formula, as I reflect back on our work, and we developed the first PFAS action plan in the state, and we did it before we were required to by the state, was realizing that success is a team sport. Cindy talked about the importance of collaboration, and that is exactly what PFAS is. And you know what? To a certain extent, we all own a piece of the mess because of the products we consume in our house, and these big industries are producing products that we want for our own convenience. So to a certain extent, we have a piece of the problem, but industry also has a huge role to play, as well as other things like fire suppressions and other things. So there's really no one smoking gun, because PFAS is everywhere in our environment, and it accumulates and bioaccumulates in the environment. And so we have to really focus on collaboration. And this is really important, and we have to follow the science, that science is truth and everything else is just speculation. And there is a lot of speculation out there of what's causing it and what the risks are. And we are still emerging and learning, and we have to really rely on the science here. There is, as we've experienced, a lot of the emotion and people coming to our commission meetings and saying, what are you doing? Take quick action. And our commission has really hesitated doing that, because if we take quick action, there may be unintended consequences that we have not thought completely through. So we have to go slow to go fast as we're doing this. And because science takes time to understand, and the regulatory controls we need, the standards and limits, are taking time for the EPA to do the science to get to standards that are meaningful for the public and give us targets. The other thing is we have to have a learning mindset, and that is this is a journey of exploration and experimentation, and there are going to be surprises. I spent time in Denmark in 2022. their groundwater is completely contaminated in Denmark from fire foam. And they are trying things, and they're trying risky things, they're trying expensive things, but they're still trying things. And they have the public behind them because 80% of the people support their government in Denmark. So they're doing things that maybe we can't do. There's less tolerance for risk-taking here. The other thing is that the forever chemical label on these is a real sensational headline story. And it breeds a bit of fatalism and victimization versus being optimistic and focusing on the leadership that we need and hope that we can actually do something about it. There are smart people around the world, like Dr. Yang and others, that are working on this problem. We're going to solve this problem. And if we give this time and we put the money into the research we need to make this happen. So we always have to be focusing and learning and getting it done. And then finally, we have to break things down. And that is the only way the sewage district could manage this. I was so overwhelmed with this problem and not knowing it. We had to break it down into manageable chunks so we could actually do things that the public could see and they could see progress. However small that progress was, we were making that progress. We came up with our first action plan in 2019. It says last revised in June 4th, 2019. That really hasn't been revised. This was the plan that was approved by our commission. But it had all these elements of looking at our ordinances, looking at what happens to our biosolids when there's PFAS in our biosolids. Where does it go? What happens? How does it transport through the soil, through the groundwater? What happens to it when it comes up in crops? All of those things, and then focusing also on pre-treatment and how do we eliminate the problem to begin with. We've developed an award-winning website. And Cindy, I'd like to put this on your list of websites to share with people because a lot of our learnings and everything is on there. And then we have a sampling plan and then pollution prevention. So this has been our strategy that we've been moving forward since 2019. There's 3 major steps. We started the baseline testing in 2021, and we would have started it sooner, but there were not certified labs in the state of Wisconsin that could actually test at parts per trillion level to give us reliable results. We had to wait 2 years for the state-approved labs to actually do testing. And we have these 3 phases that we're going through, and I'll just briefly go through them here. First, the baseline is, what is actually coming into the plant, what is leaving the plant, and what's happening in between. We use polymers in our treatment process. We use coatings and in other things. We were hoping that there wasn't more PFAS leaving the plant than coming into the plant. But if there was, that would allow us to start looking at more of our different products. And so we tested our polymers and tried to get a sense for what's actually happening. And then after we did the initial testing, then we started doing temporal testing because that first testing is just a snapshot in time, right? I mean, it could be high, it could be low, we don't know. So we're continuing to monitor on an annual or regular basis what's happening in our influent, effluent, and biosolids, and really make sure we're following state protocols for testing. And really starting to look at our waste acceptance procedures because there are a lot of companies and others that bring material in trucks to our treatment plant. And we need to do a better job of understanding what's in those trucks. And then moving forward, looking at septage, which is hauled waste, looking at land application models for what happens when we apply our biosolids to the fields and doing work around our lab capacity so we continue to have the science we need. I did want to focus on our effort is on pollution prevention and source reduction. We have an ordinance that's always been it's our sewer use ordinance that requires industrial users to have an industrial pretreatment permit with us. And we've been now requiring industries to start doing voluntary PFAS testing. And we like the voluntary approach over the required approach because we want to collaborate, we want partners, and industry has responded in very positively to this. They are testing what's coming out, and then the pollution prevention comes in to say, hey, if you're indicating or seeing levels of PFAS, where is it coming from? By looking at what's the source of it, how do these industries, if they have PFAS, minimize the source and then maintain those reductions over time. The good thing is in our service area, the Dane County area, there are no major producers of PFAS chemicals in our service area, in our sewer shed. And that's really good news. That's unlike other areas where there's companies like Dow and other companies doing things that are having major impacts on the community. So I think to summarize here that we do recognize that PFAS is an emerging concern. We are taking a leadership role for the community in looking at it and understanding it and helping other wastewater treatment plants around the country understand it through our work. The levels and types continue to be as expected. They're below the state standards and below thresholds for biosolids. So we feel we're in a good condition now, but it doesn't mean we're done. We're going to continue with the testing and the learning and see what else we can do and wait for some of those standards that come from the EPA and the states so we have a target to shoot from. So with that, I just wanted to remind you of our website. Thank you. I'm at 12 minutes and I'll turn it back over to Joy.
Thank you, Michael. I'm going to be introducing Dr. Yang, and he is the assistant professor from the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at Clarkson University. And he's also the co-founder of a company called Res, capital E-T, Res Et Water. As Cindy Boyle pointed out in her opening remarks, the horse has left the barn. So what are we going to do with all of the PFAS that are stored in our biosolids, that are in all those filters that we put into the land waste systems, etc.? This is an issue that needs to be handled in a way that is affordable, cost-effective, and can be scaled up to the size and the magnitude of the PFAS problem that we're dealing with. I went looking for someone that could talk about that, and I found Dr. Yang. He is working on something called the piezoelectric ball mining. And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but you have PFAS, you have piezo in your house right now. They're what ignite your gas furnace. They're what used to be used in your lighter. There was a little metal thing that would go against a little crystal and cause a flame. So this is a mechanical process. So I'm going to let Dr. Yang explain it better because I'm not going to try, but just know that this is not rocket science that he is using in order to solve this problem. He likes to bring lab scale ideas into reality, and he is always using as the priority, how can he best use taxpayers' money? So with that, I'm going to open this up to Dr. Yang and let him explain the process that he has been putting into play that I think has great promise for us in the future.
Thank you so much, Cara. I think you did a great job. Explain it even better than my grad student. So let's see. You hear me okay and you see the screen? So can you see the screen and you hear me okay?
Yep,
Okay.
I'm both.
All right. I come from Clarkson University. I would like to give a big shout out to my institute. So we have really the top-notch PFAS analytical facility, and centered around this analytical facility, we have several environmental engineering faculty dedicate their career to PFAS detection and control. So more story about Clarkson and PFAS, you can Google it. And I'm about to talk about remediation, but I agree with Michael. Prevention is better than prevent is better than repent, right? So we have to cut the source first. And if, well, for those already discharged into the environment, that's the topic I'm going to talk about. So I also echo with Cindy. I also live on a private well, so I can feel the pain if you found PFAS in the well water and then you don't have an alternative source of drinking water. I would like, before talking about my research, I would like to talk about some immediate solution that might be able to help. If you live on a centralized drinking water treatment plant, there's actually many technology available. So if you see the framework within showing you using activated carbon or ion exchange or membrane, these are all separation technology that proved to be very effective for removing PFAS from drinking water treatment plant. And if you are live on a to give you an idea about the cost, Black and VTech prepare a very nice report published in 2023. This is free to the public. They perform an extensive cost analysis, of course on a larger scale, but there are many insights, very interesting, and I enjoy reading it about. So if you live on a private well, my suggestion would be install these drinking water, mini drinking water treatment plant under your sink. I'm not advocate for product. Okay, you can find any of these with a unit composed of activated carbon, cartridge, and a reverse osmosis membrane at a cost less than $500. And so these are all very well validated separation technology. Their efficacy on PFAS removal has been extensively investigated. So if you are suffering from this problem, the first step I would strongly recommend is to install this treatment process under your sink to secure your drinking water safety. So let's talk about, so we have immediate solution available at large scale and at household scale. Then why we still need to concern about PFAS? So for all this immediately implementable technology, they are all separation technology. Separation means you kind of transfer PFAS problems from water to another phase, right? For example, if you use reverse osmosis membrane to separate PFAS from water, then you will create a membrane concentrate with the PFAS concentration probably magnified several times. And if you are using activated carbon or resin to absorb PFAS, of course, you got clean water out of it before the resin spend their lifetime. But once you at some point you need to discard those solvent, right? So that create a solid waste problem. So my research interest really focused on this highly concentrated PFAS in a very complicated matrix. So why the destruction of PFAS is so complicated? Because there are thousands of PFAS. They have different functional group that leads to different physical chemical property. And when we talk about PFAS, even I'm talking about high concentration PFAS, its concentration is still at the 10 to the -6-ish mole per liter, versus if we are dealing with treating PFAS in water, this tiny amount of PFAS is surrounded by 55.5 mole per liter of water molecule. That means you need to very selectively destroy PFAS, which is very recalcitrant in the water phase, right? And things will only get more complicated when it comes to the destruction of PFAS in solid phase. Before I dive into technical detail, I would like to first clarify there are 3 levels of term describing removal. So the most common one, if you see any commercial product, they will claim that, okay, our product can remove PFAS. So very likely they are using a separation strategy. That means there will be a material that grabs PFAS from water, but not destroying them. If you dig into some emerging technologies, many of them will say, they'll use the word destruction or destroy. So that means this technology may partially destroy or completely destroy the structure so that, for example, PFOS, after losing one fluorine, you will no longer see it in the instrument as PFOS. But the remaining fragments might be a concern. What are their potential toxicity, right? And what are their recalcitrant resistance toward further destruction? That's a big question mark. So I would say destruction is still not the perfect descriptor to define the removal of PFAS. In the following slide, I'm going to I'm proud to introduce our study, which set a very high bar. We are not aiming at not only destroy PFAS, but also prove that all the fluorine are chopped off, and then they all recover as fluoride as the end product, right? So if you see a term 100% defluorination, that means the complete destruction of PFAS to the best of to the most comprehensive extent. All right, I'm gonna first talk about the disposal of concentrate. So we have many PFAS concentrate now. Mike already talked about AFFF. These are firefighting foam containing all the PFAS, and this is a picture contributed by one of my friends. So he recently visited a museum ship, and then the ship also, he surprisingly found that these PFAS are stocked in the bucket. They are still there. They're everywhere. So other than all this liquid waste, we have contaminated soil and sediment, and also we have spent solvent that in contact with PFAS. So before the regulation, before EPA pushing the regulation to define PFAS as a hazardous waste, these solid or liquid waste were usually disposed by incineration or landfill, but now they are all banned or disfavored because of a lot of concern. So we need a technology, or we need a group of technology that can achieve PFAS mineralization or complete defluorination at room temperature and ambient pressure. All right, so first I'm going to talk about how to treat those AFFF. Right, so AFFF is a nasty chemical product. Once it is diluted by water, a little bit of agitation or gas purging will create a lot of foam. So that creates a lot of practical challenge when we deal with this kind of waste. And we have electrochemical oxidation, UV sulfur, hydrothermal, all this available technology. They somewhat prove that they are able to transform those PFAS, but none of them can achieve 100% defluorination except the hydrothermal method. But know that if you want to use hydrothermal method, that means you are cooking those PFAS with highly concentrated sodium hydroxide in a pressure cooker, right? So that's doable, but to me, the condition is kind of harsh. And certainly there will be a question about whether you can scale it up. So I'm proud to present one of our recent study by a combination of UV sulfide reduction and electrochemical oxidation. We are able to achieve 100% defluorination of PFAS with various structure in many water substrates. So I don't want to get you bored with the technical detail. So the philosophy in this process is that we pass the water contaminated by PFAS or AFFF to this commercial UV reactor. And in this UV reactor, we'll be able to produce hydrated electron, which is the most reductive chemical, to defluorinate PFAS, selectively chopping some of the CF bond, replace it with hydrogen atom. After that, the water will come through an electrochemical reactor, providing a very harsh oxidative condition. In this case, we found that this polyfluorinated compound or structure can be completely defluorinated into fluoride. So that's the meat of this study. And one of the examples, there are many other fundamental data in that figure, but I want to call your attention is that we successfully showcased the complete destruction and defluorination of all the PFAS detected in AFFF. And if I may draw your attention at panel D, we eventually present a 100% defluorination for the first time. So this is the very first in kind of study that achieved complete shut off of all CF bond into fluoride at ambient pressure and ambient condition. And I would like to talk about how can we address solid waste, right? So this which is a big challenge. So I'm still going to use electrochemical oxidation approach, just as described by the mediator. The process we develop is called piezoelectric ball milling. So the idea is that we try to introduce a mechanical impact on a material called piezoelectric material or piezoelectric mineral. This kind of unique mineral can produce a transient high voltage, and I'm going to give you a number directly. So there are, if you put this piezoelectric mineral in a form of powder into a ball mill, as shown in this picture, the ball mill only contain a jar filled with stainless steel ball. And when you agitate this jar, the ball collide. And if the ball hits on those piezoelectric material, the theoretical calculation give us a stunningly high voltage. Every collision can create 1,000 kilovolt of transient high potential. And the theoretical value for PFAS destruction is only 4 volts. So in that case, we are confident that if we create these highly oxidative or highly oxidative or highly reductive environment, we are able to destroy PFAS. So with that, we kind of implement this idea in the destruction of PFOA and PFOS in the form of pure solid chemical. So how we do that? We simply add those PFOA and PFOS chemical in the ball mill jar, and then add a piezoelectric material called boron nitride. This is an affordable industrial gradient. Of course, you can add another even more common piezoelectric material called silicon dioxide, which is sand, right? You can achieve the same degree of PFAS treatment. So we found that by simply adding those ingredients into our stainless steel pot and then agitate it, enable the ball collision, we are able to, again, for the first time, achieve 100% defluorination, 100% destruction of these PFOA and PFOS at ambient pressure and ambient temperature. So we further implement this idea to treat PFAS contaminated sediment. Again, if you see the reduction of the height of the bar, that means we are destroying those PFAS, right? So it works in complicated matrix. And further, we apply this technology for the treatment of AFFF, undiluted AFFF. That means we're using this technology for the treatment of liquid chemical waste. We observed a decade of these PFAS and also, again, 100% defluorination at ambient conditions. So this manuscript is under review, so I believe I'm happy to share with you when it's available online. All right, the last case is an ongoing study. We use the same idea to treat spent resin and activated carbon. And forget about all this nomenclature. I want you to stay focused on this orange line. So if we use the boron nitride assisted ball milling technology to treat spent resin loaded with PFOS, we can achieve complete destruction of PFOS after 3 hours ball milling. So big question. I talk a lot about some seemingly fancy technology. Can they be scaled up? The answer is yes, right? So for the first study, we combine commercial UV reactor and electrochemical oxidation reactor. These are all commercial off-the-shelf product. And for example, the large-scale electrochemical oxidation process has been already implemented for 12 years. They are already there. So they just need an opportunity to be picked by us and then rationally designed into a treatment drain. And can the ball mill the ball milling process be scaled up? The answer is still yes, because ball mill is a readily available industrial scale equipment. It is commonly used in mineral industry and metallurgical industry. So again, they are there, and we just need to pick them, put them back to use for PFAS destruction in solid waste. So the take-home message, forget about all these bullet points. The key message I want to deliver you is the confidence. PFAS are not forever, right? We have technology on our hand. We are able to mash them down to fluoride, right? So with that, I would like to thank all the sponsor of the research, and I'm open to question at the end of the seminar.
Thank you so much, Dr. Yang. Susan Johnson, we're going to have you introduce Paul Hyman. Oh, you're muted.
At this point, we need to learn some information about where legislation is at here in Wisconsin, and what kinds of things just average residents, citizens can do to help Wisconsin develop into adopting legislation that will help protect its residents from PFAS. So it is my honor to introduce to you Paul Hyman, who is the policy director over at Wisconsin's Green Fire. Paul is Green Fire's policy director, and he joined in October 2018 after 34 years as the DNR legislative liaison and 4 years as the Nature Conservancy's legislative liaison. It is his job to work closely with Green Fire's working groups, chairs, and the Green Fire board to represent Green Fire to legislators, their staff, the governor's staff, state agencies, and other conservation and environmental groups statewide. He shares Green Fire members' expertise and knowledge of the issues with policymakers. So, Paul, please take it away.
Thank you, Susan. Real quickly, I think many of you know about Green Fire, and I think Melissa Johnson talked to you before, and some of you were on, I wrote a paper called The Imbalance of Power about what's going on at the Capitol, and I know I can recognize some of you from that. There's 900 plus Green Fire members, all volunteers, except for the massive staff of 6, 2 of which are part-time. And we are scientists, we are environmental educators, environmental law people, researchers. The person that I have learned the most about PFAS from is a guy named Jim Bauman, who I know Michael knows very well. He gave out the first fine or cited 3M in 1991 on PFAS. Jim has known about PFAS for a long time. I, like Michael and Cindy, have just found out about it. Maybe 6 or 7 years ago when I was at the Nature Conservancy. I had no idea what it meant. I still can't say the word correctly. But what struck me, because I have some experience, meaning I am older and gone through this for 45 years, is something that Todd Ames, who was the deputy secretary at DNR, said so much better than I did. And he does it a number of times in speeches when he talks about PFAS and the struggles that DNR has had in trying to get the regulations, the standards, the rules, and legislation in place. Is, well, PFAS is, we can't really do anything about it because we really need it. Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was PFCs and PCBs that we heard that from. I guess what I'm talking about was PFAS we have to use them for the products because No, that was CFCs, and that was the ozone hole, and we had to have those. Oh no, I know what this. Yeah, we have to have the PFCs because farmers will never be able to use their crop. That's DDT and Aldicarb. All of these products we are in. If it takes 8 to 10 years, which is about how long those took, we're in about year 3 or 4. And I'm going to tell you some good news, then I'm going to tell you what else we need to do. And then the final answer is pretty simple, and it's November 5th. So we can talk about exactly, I mean, here's what you need to do. You need to get people who are going to represent what you want. Good news, we have a $208 million problem. That's DNR numbers and thankfully Jimmy Bauman's numbers because he knows how to read them and put them together. At least initially, we're going to need that amount of money, $208 million, to get the GAC systems and stuff that Dr. Yang is talking about in place. After that, we're going to need a lot more money to keep the product of their systems going. But we're not sure how much that is at this point. But anyway, there's good news. 92 million of that 208 million has been allocated. DNR's got it. Thank goodness for the EPA and the current administration, because they're putting out billions of dollars for cleanups. Not 10 million, not $1 million, not the pittance that we often get from the state legislature, which does nothing. Real money to change the paradigm, to flip the switch and actually get the job done. It's coming in. We have 2 more years of it. 3 more years of it. Hundreds of millions of dollars, which we can use. We also have safe drinking water funds and some other water cleanup funds that Governor Evers has said, use them to get that, to use them for PFAS. This is very good news. The money is out there. And the fact of the matter is, it doesn't always match exactly what we need and where we need it. I think Michael would probably like to make a few changes to those things. And one of the major amounts of money that could be used is in the Joint Finance Committee. There's 125 million. And why that money doesn't carry the same kind of limitations that other money does, so that the Michaels can use those for planning and some of the things that cost a lot of money. And of course, your taxpayer is paying for them. So the money is there. I'm not too worried about that anymore. And that's good news, because 2 years ago, I would have said, how much is it? Where is it all? We got to get our hands around it. And because of the Cindy Boyles and the Michaels out there, people know about it. People are talking to their legislators. Legislators haven't done the right thing yet, but remember, we're getting there. Things will be done. And when I say things will be done, we have to also remember that a lot of this money we had to test first. We had to find out, get our arms around the problem. And our arms are around the problem. And there is some good news there. And that is that I'm gonna have to read a couple numbers here. Of the 1,900 public water systems tested, there have been PFAS found in 500. Okay, the good news from that is 2/3 there is no detect, or they detect below any health standard. 5% of our public drinking water our systems are over the standard. And now when I say the standard, this is a very hard thing to understand and explain. And it's one of the things that Green Fire is really going to work hard on. I'm now talking about the new federal 4 parts per trillion standard. The state had a standard before this. It was passed by Governor Walker's Natural Resources Board, and the numbers are higher, 20 parts per trillion and 70 parts per trillion. Thankfully, EPA has the science and the sense, and they went, no, 4 parts per trillion. So that number has been proposed. Now you've got a state number, that's the law. You've got a proposed federal standard, that ain't the law. And if you talk to anybody who knows about federal rules and federal standards, maybe 2009 would be a reasonable time to say about then those standards will be in place. That depends upon the litigation that industry will start to stop those standards. That could throw on a couple more years. And they're working on it. We know they are. The National Chamber of Commerce is already talking about it to their attorneys, how to stop this and how to slow things down. So there are really three areas where in the policy arena, we need to make some headway. I'd like to say, and I'm sorry, when I was listening to my introduction, they talk about what we can do in terms of state law. I'm going to finish up with that because in a lot of ways right now, I'm not going to deal with state law. The current majority in the legislature has failed for 6 years. And when I was talking to them at the end of last session, as I lobby, I said, what are you going to tell your constituents? You haven't passed the laws that we need, and the $125 million that you put in the budget for this, you haven't allowed the DNR to use. There's people drinking this water. There's people spending a lot of money for systems. Thank you, Dr. Yang. At least there's systems out there, but they don't have $500 to spend on it. And then what do they do with the filters full of PFAS? So the state legislature should take this up. And again, I'm going to end up by saying you can take care of that November 5th. But for right now, we have the federal government that has put in, I think, a very good standard, 4 parts per trillion. But what I don't know yet, and thankfully I'm working with my people that understand things, what are we going to tell people in like 2 years? They're at, I don't know, 8 parts per trillion, 10 parts per trillion. Well, that's above 4 parts per trillion, and you should really help me out, state. Well, no, we got 20 parts per trillion. Or for your drinking water, 70 parts per trillion. Or for your groundwater, nothing. We don't have a standard. You drink it, and if you got a problem, take care of it. That's astounding. I don't think people have any idea that that is what the law is. There is no groundwater standard. And the feds can't give a standard because the feds don't do it. Only the state does groundwater. We take that federal standard for surface water and drinking water, and then the state can do it. So we certainly are going to have to figure out how to, as quickly as possible, get into place the kinds of standards and the kinds of rules and regulations, which DNR is starting already, everybody. They're scoping out. The scope statement is the first thing you do when you're going to change rules. They're scoping out these rules. The fact of the matter is, it's very unlikely for any of these rules to pass because of what the current majority in the legislature is doing. They're going to kill them when they get to the legislature. We know it. They've already done it. Or else DNR is going to get to the point where they can't afford to do them. That's what has happened because of something called the RAINS Act, which until we get rid of it, we're not going to have any new environmental standards in Wisconsin. Or a new party comes in and allows new standards and new science to be put into place. It's going to take a while to get these new standards in place. I want people to kind of understand that because you read in the newspaper, EPA just changed the law. Well, that's what it sounds like. And it's 4 parts per trillion. Yay, way to go. No, it's not. It's a proposed rule. It's got to go through a process. And even the process gives the Michael Mookas of the world, although Michael does it on his own anyway with no laws, till 2027 to get their testing done, till 2029 to have a plan in place. It's 2024. So for the next 5 years, good luck, everybody. Again, astounding to me. People are drinking poison water. You don't say, well, we're going to do it. We're going to go through the regular process. Do an emergency rule. Do something different. They're not. We need these, or to get these laws into, we need to get these rules into place. DNR knows how to do this. Dr. Yang knows how to get the technology to get rid of it. It's not rocket science. We're changing public policy and fighting in industrial feeling and industry's feeling that not yet. First, we have to make our money on this stuff. Then next, we have to protect ourselves from liability so we don't end up paying for the cleanup. We'll make the state pay for the cleanup, which is basically what's going on. How come 3M and DuPont and the makers of the stuff, how come they're not paying to clean it up? They used it, they made the money on it. Because we can't get the legislature to do that. They don't pass laws like that. Love them to, but I'm talking about what happens in 2024 in Wisconsin with the current legislature. Two things that we will need to have done, and we're going to need Dr. Yang's and Michael's brains on these, is biosolids and disposal and destruction. Now, Dr. Yang is there on disposal and destruction. We don't have a law that says anything about doing it. And in terms of biosolids, I was working on biosolids in the late 90s. It's a huge issue that there's so much misinformation, it's unbelievable, yet we aren't doing the testing statewide on it so we can give you good information. It's one of the good things that Greenfire tries to do the most is get the facts, get the numbers, put it out there, and then hopefully people go, well, we better do this because it's pretty clear this is going on. We don't have those numbers for biosolids. We didn't have them on for PFAS in water systems 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. Michael was doing it 5 years ago, but most other treatment plants were not. So now we know where we have to go. We have to figure out long-term what we're going to do with PFAS once we get them out of the water. We have to figure out how our biosolids, by the way, is the treatment facility has solids after it cleans up the water, and they can be spread on farmers' fields and used as fertilizers and done correctly. Bingo, way to go. You put them on right before the rainstorm, boom, into the lake, into the stream, problem. And that has been going on for some time. So glad to answer any questions. The simple bottom line is with any policy, the people who are going to help take care of this issue are not in the majority right now. So there's nothing they can do about it. In terms of joint finance committee or whatever else, every time they go in, they try to get the money out, they're voted down. So the way that this is going to change is if a new majority is in at the legislature, and I don't want to be partisan or anything, but everybody knows it's currently the Republicans. Until the Democrats get in, it's not going to happen. And unless everyone has changed their mind in the last 3 months since the legislature stopped, and we were there and thinking Senate Bill 312, the PFAS regulatory bill was going to pass, it's not going to pass. You're going to have new people in, and the idea would be to pass the laws and get the money out. So thank you. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Paul, for sharing that familiar mix of frustration and optimism that is PFAS legislation and the prospects. Thank you to all of our speakers for all of this amazing information that you've shared. I'm definitely feeling very optimistic and like I've got a better touch on the realism about PFAS contamination. I am going to get everybody added here to a panel for a Q&A session. While I do that, Paul, I think that the first question will be really good for you. You touched on it just a second ago. Someone is interested in hearing what the panel thinks about the legislation that has circulated most recently in Wisconsin.
If you're talking about the CLEAR Act, which I think is maybe what you're talking about, this is the bill that was introduced 6 years ago. CLEAR Act 1, there was a CLEAR Act 2. Both were really good bills. They cover a lot of things. It gave DNR the positions they need. It's just another thing you got to know, that I was telling the committee chair, fine, you pass this bill and you give DNR money. There's nobody there to do the work. There is no staff. So anyway, this new bill that's out is excellent. It's got staff, it's got money, it handles the biosolids research needs, it handles the other scientific needs, and you know, it doesn't have a chance of passing, but it's a really good bill.
Awesome, thank you. For Dr. Yang, it may be too early to say, but where do you think that demineralization, defluorination technology would be best deployed? At the source of contamination, at the wastewater treatment level, or individual? Would this be scaled down for private well owners, do you think?
So from destruction perspective, it is always easier for us to treat the contaminant at the source before it spreads out. And when we talk about so I propose a very high bar about complete defluorination, but at the practical level, let's talk about how to implement those technology to make sure that all the target PFAS down to 4 ppt. Right, that's the most practical parts. So I'm not sure if I answered the question. So to wrap up, I think we should, if you want to implement any destruction technology, implement it for the treatment of concentrated chemical before they disperse in the environment. That's easier. And also, I do not think we at this point we should aggressively propose all the treatment process should achieve 100% defluorination. Let's focus on how can we get rid of those, reduce those contaminants level down to 4 ppb, right? So we need to do it stepwise.
Absolutely, thank you. Speaking about it at the wastewater level, Michael, is there anything that you wish the decision makers or even the public knew about how their wastewater treatment plants interact with these chemicals?
Well, we interact by being almost a pass-through. All the PFAS comes through our system and leaves the system. It is not treated at the treatment plant. And I think we're learning that our biological processes and the chemicals we use in the treatment of wastewater are not contributing to the concentrations of PFAS. The biosolids area is an area of growing study of really understanding how PFAS moves in the groundwater, how organic matter can actually take up PFAS from the groundwater, and how it moves into plants and through crop uptake, and looking at different crops uptake PFAS at different levels based on the concentrations and soil types. So there's a lot of variables to really understand. We do know that from just a human exposure, that exposure levels are very low, because usually it's the level of toxicity in the soil and how much contact you have with the soil matter in terms of whether there is a health impact. And people generally don't have much exposure to the biosolids themselves. So that is good news on that front, but we still have more work to do, or the science community has more work to do.
Thank you. That actually goes along nicely with a question about using the defluorination process on the soil. What else is destroyed when the fluoride atoms are removed?
We haven't looked into that yet, honestly, because we want the soil we are going to treat is heavily contaminated with PFAS. So whatever biotas in there, they are already toxified by PFAS. And whatever co-component are there, you don't want to reuse those soil, right? So you want to destroy all these PFAS, and then this soil goes to landfill safely, right? So that's the purpose. So we are treating contaminated soil as solid waste. Therefore, our first priority is to make sure that all the PFAS gone down to fluoride. While whether we deteriorate the nutrient value or whether we kill all these microorganisms during the treatment, that's not our concern yet. So we want to get rid of the dangerous stuff first.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's a good question.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to pivot a little to a few questions about what we can do. For Cindy, or really for anyone, what is a good first step to go from a concerned citizen to an effective advocate on PFAS?
Educate yourself, do what you're doing right now. There are an abundant number of resources. Honestly, just Google PFAS and then read it, and prepare yourself for being unnerved. Right, Paul?
Yeah.
Yep, that seems fair.
And then,
Related.
and then
Sorry,
if
go
I
ahead.
can, honestly, just talk about it. Talk about it with your circle of influence, your community, your neighbors, your family. Let it be a topic that is familiar, that isn't, when it's brought up, that everybody isn't dumbfounded when they hear it. And that's already started happening in the last 3 years, I would say, become much more common. So that's a priority.
Can I jump in just for a second too? Ask your legislators, whoever you're supporting, specific questions like, when are you going to get out the 125 million? There's 125 million sitting in a committee for PFAS. But because they say, no, Governor Evers did that, so, and he didn't sign our bill, you can't have it. Ask them specifically, when will you be giving that money to the people that need it? Ask them specifically, what laws are you going to change so that we can address PFAS problems? Because they always hide behind their answers, but they can't if you specifically ask them. And then you can say, well, sorry, I can't vote for you. Because they need to know that you're looking at it.
I agree with that, Paul. You have to really hold them accountable and don't listen to the rhetoric that this is an emerging contaminant, that there needs to be more science, that industry is cooperating and they're being very cooperative and good corporate citizens, and that, they can self-regulate. Oh my God, my head almost blew off my shoulders. No, they cannot. They cannot. And they've proven that they cannot for generations.
Right.
That is a dangerous recipe that will only leave us in the horrible position that we're in. So unfortunately, they do need rules and regulations, and vote for the people who will get them for you.
Right.
Can I jump in here? I think, we could probably wait for a long time for something to happen at the state level. However, local action makes a huge difference. Just look at what the city of Madison has done with their drinking water supply, and they have taken action without limits on drinking water, closing wells down, doing more research, being very transparent. And, the city of Madison is a real role model in that area. The other thing is, and that's, which gets to when I say we're all part of the solution, is support your utility rates. When dollars have to go into the rates needed to clean up sites, to make the water, to purify water, or to, drill new wells to deal with contaminated wells, that takes rate dollars. That's not money that's sitting around in a bank account. And so when those rate increases come up, make sure you're advocating for those types of increases, which are going to public health.
Michael's absolutely correct on that. I can't imagine being in his position, because he's, obviously looking out for the public health and safety, and that's going to come with a big price tag. And echoing a little bit what Paul was saying earlier, yes, the public has to recognize that there are going to be expenses attached to this on the front end, and then parallel tracks around that, in my experience, is that industry needs to be held financially accountable for the harm that they have caused, whether that's state DOJ holding them accountable, whether that's municipalities holding them accountable, or individual innocent landowners holding them accountable, all of the above. They have made enormous amounts of profit year after year, knowing full well the harm that these chemicals present to public health and the environment. So hold everybody accountable and recognize that there are no white knights, that we all protect us individually. You have to advocate for yourself and your family, and that it's going to be painful. The process is going to be expensive, and it's going to be an adjustment, but public health and lives are on the line. So there's no other alternative.
Thank you. A related question to that, what can advocates do to inform citizens about the relationship between consumer demand and manufacturing as a prevention method?
Well, Cindy might be best at this, but I have a boss, Melissa Johnson, who thankfully, when she talks about this, she says, stop buying this crap. You know, if you went out and bought a Teflon pan last week, you're going to have PFAS. There's a long list of products. Jimmy Ballman will tell you, you know, popcorn and some of those things you're putting in your mouth, that's really what you got to care about. Women's makeup, you're putting it on your face. It's got PFAS in it. I mean, other things like shoes and things that have been sprayed or whatever, okay, not great, but really be careful. And we're all buying it. So if we're buying it, they're going to keep making it. Sure, right now, I know companies are like, uh-oh, there are a lot of Cindy Boyles out there, and they're talking about things that we better do something about. But we've got the product right now, so we're going to continue to make it. Stop buying it. Start telling those companies, not until you start non-PFAS. You know, buy, you know, steel pans and those kind of things that don't have it. So anyway, that's one thing you can certainly do.
I would agree with that, Paul. Obviously, I haven't gone out and bought a FFF firefighting foam for my family to use, and that's our primary culprit.
Yeah.
But yeah, an environmental working group is a great resource. You can go to their website and they will have a long list of products that are PFAS free. And you'll see that there's legislation. I think I just read today that Connecticut unanimously, imagine that in this state, if we had anything passed unanimously,
Right.
passed legislation that has a phased out system or a phased out approach, right? So over a period of time, PFAS just aren't going to be allowed to be implemented into their products for manufacturing. We have to work toward legislation along that end, but hand in hand, demand will also drive those things. So public awareness and changing our consumer habits and not buying products that are going to harm us, and all of that starts with educating yourselves.
It seems like there's always some other benefits to doing the right thing when it comes to reducing PFAS. You know, we always talk about having, when you go to the grocery store, buy food around the perimeter of the store where all the vegetables and everything are, and that leads to a healthy lifestyle and healthy eating. Then you're not buying packaged foods that have PFAS. So you're not having to make the decision because you're making the healthy choice to begin with. That's just gets into the more holistic thinking of this, that it's just more than PFAS. It's just looking at overall lifestyle choices and how they impact all elements of our life.
Yeah, I think that boycotting the commercial product really works from our research perspective. Before the meeting, I share a story about we can no longer buy PFOS pure chemical because everybody talk about that and the manufacturers stop manufacturing. And also Cindy mentioned that the AFFF, so the PFAS containing AFFF, we cannot buy it from Amazon. 2 years ago, I still can't get it, but now they are all off the shelf. I would like to hear Cindy's comment.
Sorry, Dr. Yang. I'd love to say that industry actually stopped manufacturing that because the demand went away. Industry stopped manufacturing that because they knew that the jig was up. So yeah. It's chemical whack-a-mole. You know, as soon as enforcement entities who get too close and start sniffing around and want to actually hold them accountable, we'll stop manufacturing that. Yep. We'll tweak that molecular structure, and don't look at us too long and too hard. We've got it. We're self-regulating. Nonsense.
Speaking of molecular structure, one direction in our area, environmental study, is to provide data about how you can change the structure, make the PFAS maintain the property, but with the increased treatability. So that's something we can do. And there are some conclusions, and you see that all these new PFAS, they have this, they change the structure, replace one fluoride with chloride, or insert the oxygen inside. I'm not this type of researcher, and neither I can speak for them whether it's good science or bad science, helping them bypass the regulation. But there are one approach everybody shout out loud that we should ban these PFAS, and the other approach kind of speak for the industry. Okay, if you do that, you probably can bypass the law. that form a new PFAS. And somewhat, one typical example is that we are using PFBA to replace PFOA, because the toxicology data suggests that PFBA won't stay in, is less hydrophobic, so you can discharge them out, right? So that's the purest consensus, or people believe that, okay, we can probably use PFBA as an alternative. But after 10 years, it turns out that, okay, we have a problem with PFBA. So it's like a seesaw. You ban something, we propose something new, and then the seesaw goes back again. So
Do we see the obvious in your, let me back up, because I made a note that I don't want to be remiss, Dr. Yang, in thanking you, because it is folks like you who will end up saving the day, who are actually looking for the solutions. Yes, you will. Keep doing it. But back to where I was going with that was, I mean, the obvious, we're all hearing it, right? It is insane to keep using things that aren't proven to be safe. I mean, we're all just guinea pigs. This model, profits and money, and is a priority over practical sense that things should, at least to some measure, have to be proven safe before they can just be put out into the open market. And those are policy decisions, and those come down to elected, officials. So, and round we go.
If I could just jump in, this is a great conversation, and I would love to tie it into some of the questions I'm seeing in the chat. So there's so many aspects of this, and so many things. Like, as an individual, I feel like a lot of people could feel overwhelmed by, should they be learning like all of the consumer products that have PFAS in them so they can avoid them when they're out shopping in the grocery store? Should they be becoming advocates to talk to their legislatures? Should they be going to town hall meetings? Should they be educating themselves on emerging research on how to tackle this? What if there's like one thing that a busy person who wants to do the best for their family and their communities on PFAS that they could do? What would you recommend that be?
Vote. There are people who would stop PFAS. There are people who are going to protect. If you want to stop it, vote for the people that will stop it. Takes 1 hour, 1 day in November. Then you've got policymakers that'll change things.
I second that. That is absolutely the single thing that you can do to have the largest impact. If your personal politics just don't align with that advocacy from Paul and I, then the next thing would be test. If you have a private drinking water well, test your water, because there are all those ways we're talking about with makeup or popcorn bags. Those are secondary. So drinking it through your water, breathing it in the air, those are the primary methods that you're going to have increased blood serum levels. But check your family's drinking water, check your public utilities levels, and make sure that at least that is safe. And based on everything that's been said here today, what the next steps are if you do find it. Everybody's in so much a better place. Like when we found it, it was so new. It was like just you were scrounging around to learn and find information. We were all watching Dark Waters and The Devil and for God's sake, that is exactly the same story as our community. Watch it. It's the same exact thing. But vote.
Michael and Dr. Yang, did you want to chime in about that as well?
I'd just say pay attention to what's touching your food before you eat it.
You guys talk about votes, I talk about RO. So filter it. I see comment that any water purification, well, all the under the sink purification contain activated carbon as a pre-treatment. And then that aims to prolong the lifetime of RO. So there are evidence shows that RO can block most, I couldn't say all, but most of the PFAS. So RO is a membrane that only allow water molecule pass through, and PFAS molecule is larger than water molecules, so they will be blocked out. So on top of votes, get yourself an RO, secure a family. I did that, yeah.
Thank you all so much. I want to make sure we're respecting everybody's time. We are at our limit. I'm sure we could go on for another hour just picking your brains about all the amazing information that you have. I'll see maybe if we can get some of these questions answered off webinar if our speakers have the time and the ability, and we can send those in a follow-up email. But again, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you to Cindy Boyle, Michael Mucha, Dr. Yang, Paul Heinen. You've shared amazing information with us, and we're very grateful. And thank you everyone for being here, and go out and use this information. Have a good night, everyone.